Oh, hi there. This is the Security Weekly News. I have returned to this plane of existence, and it's episode 159 of this program. Welcome to the week of 17 October 2021. Very autumnal today in New England. Sinclair, ransomware, angry governors, ISC-squared, Tian Fu, fake government sites, and robot umpires. All this and Jason Wood on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
All right off, special thanks to the sexiest man to ever wear a tutu in the UK, Aaron Spicy Pants Leyland, for filling in for me while I was traveling. Thanks, Aaron. All right, Sinclair Broadcast Group, which pretty much owns every local TV station that still exists in the United States, I think, suffered a major ransomware attack on Monday. The attack spread across the company and knocked out local affiliates and advertising all across the company space. So the group released a statement saying that data exfiltration had occurred and that operations were disrupted. Some of the 294 affiliates were literally reading the news off printed scripts since pretty much literally everything, including their teleprompters, were not working. All the stations apparently in this conglomerate are connected via an Active Directory domain or domains. They didn't say if it was like one big domain or it was like one big happy flat network, or they at least had other domain dividers in there. They did manage to maintain their master national feed network, so their national programming level stuff that they send to their affiliates was isolated, and it did stay up during the outage. They did not reveal what the ransomware was or which threat group conducted the attack as yet, so there'll probably be more on that pretty soon. Speaking of ransomware, I haven't reported any of these ransomware stories in a while, but there were several this week that should remind us to remain vigilant. Israel's National Cyber Directorate, which is called the INCD, urged everyone to work on their defenses after a hospital in Israel was taken out. The INCD released indicators of compromise that were related to this particular case to help other people look for similar attacks. And there's links to that in the article if you're interested in reviewing. The warnings focused on email and VPNs and specifically mentioned outdated servers. So I'm guessing this is another patching issue. Sounds like some of the stuff we've been reporting a lot. Again, in this story, they also did not say what ransomware was used, but just fair warning, and that everyone and everything is fair game in the ransomware business. So don't think just because you're a vital service provider, they will pass you by. Hospitals, and I had to go to one last week with my mother, are indeed vulnerable. Nothing in particular I saw there that made me think that they were vulnerable, but a lot of equipment, plugs, connections, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and people who were very distracted trying to keep other people alive, tend to distract from what people are doing on site and remotely, so be vigilant. This is a really annoying story that really sort of bothered me this week. It's another one of these... Oh, excuse me. No, I don't have it. Well, I might. Ha! But you're not here, so it doesn't matter. It's just the crew. Sorry, guys. It's the Red Death. But anyway, this story really bothered me because I started seeing this story the other day, and I was really frustrated with the whole thing. But it's a pretty classic example of stuff we've all seen before. The governor of Missouri, whose name is Mike Parson, went after a journalist who reported that over 100,000 Social Security numbers were exposed on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education site in Missouri. Now, to anyone who bothered to ask a question, and hey, local officials, call us. Most of us would be willing to answer your questions. Seriously, when you get this stuff, maybe check into it a little bit before you overreact. But instead of calling someone and asking some simple questions, the governor immediately jumped on some sort of Shakespearean monologue rant to basically call down the wrath of whatever they worship in Missouri on the newspaper and hackers. And yes, that's in air quotes. He called all these people hackers, and he claimed, that whoever conducted this heinous act worthy of Ernst Stavro Blofeld, it was just kind of like over the top, in my opinion. Now, I read this and I started immediately thinking there's probably some of this red team, blue team stuff going on in the background. Being the suspicious sort and all, but still, come on. The governor said, quote, an individual access source code, and then went a step further to convert and decode that data in order to obtain Missouri teachers' personal information. The data was not freely available, and by the actor's own admission, the data had to be taken through 8 separate steps in order to generate a Social Security number. Now, the newspaper said in their story, which has apparently been taken down because I had a link to that story I saw the other day, and that link was no longer there. So I'm guessing because they're being prosecuted, they took the story down or something. But the newspaper said they were able to see the data in the HTML page source code and that they had notified the state of the matter. And then they delayed publication of the story to give them time to secure the data before they ran it. Now, I'm not an attorney, but it seems like you might want not to call down the fire on someone who tried to help you out, since they may not do that next time. They may just run the story and say, oh, there you go, Governor Hardass. Thanks a lot. But anyway, I'm guessing there's politics involved. This is another one of those things where, people are being called hackers that really just hit F12 and looked at the page source in Chrome and saw, stuff there. I don't know all the grim details. They haven't put all that out there yet, and they took the original story down. So, I don't know. ISC-squared announced that it will pilot new entry-level certs alongside all the other certs that they offer, like the CISSP. The CISSP, if you're not familiar with it, requires years of work experience. I think it's 3. I haven't looked lately, but I think when I took it, it required 3 years of documented work experience in one of their domains. And I've always thought it was a mid-career cert. They called it like 10,000 feet high and an inch deep or something like that. So it's a pretty broad cert, but it's required for a lot of jobs. And I think in the last few years, that's been trickling down into the entry-level space. And because I've had students ask me, like, how do you get a CISSP? And I'm like, well, do you have 3 years of work experience? And they're like, no. And I'm like, and I'm looking at these entry-level jobs, and they're like requiring, CISSP. And I'm like, this is stupid. But so it looks like ISC-squared is trying to put something together to create entry-level certs. But whether you like it or not, a lot of students and employers want entry-level certifications. To me, it's a good idea because it gives employers other guideposts instead of some wacky transcript that says cybersecurity 1010, which could mean anything from how to use Excel to advanced malware coding, depending on the school. And I've seen that kind of diversity in, low-level cybersecurity classes. So yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, but if and only if the certs reflect actual entry-level skills and not just how well you can memorize the 947 parts of a good cyber strategy, because we know there's way too many of those kind of certifications, so that people who actually don't really know anything but are good at memorizing lists do really well on it, and people that actually understand it but maybe aren't so great at memorizing a whole bunch of nonsense are not. So, I would hope it's more OSCP and less CISSP than what it could be. I've always used an industry board in my curriculum to try to help me decide what skills we should be teaching. So, I actually want to bring in people like you that are listening and have them come in and tell me, what do you want people to know when they graduate? And have them come up with a list of skills. So hopefully ISC-squared did that kind of homework. They came up with a list of skills employers want most, and then they figured out a way to test for those skills. I will believe it when I see it, though, but I do think it's a good concept. I mean, if you're an accountant, you get your CPA, which has a list of requirements in order to take the exam, and so the schools try to teach those requirements, and you still have to have work experience to get your CPA, but you could take the test whenever you graduate from a program that's been approved. So if ISC-squared can put together something meaningful, it would be nice. On the other hand, if it's just a big memorization test, then it'll probably be worthless, but, well, they may make money off of it, but it probably won't help much. Twitter has squashed 2 accounts, at Legal1990 and at ShiftRow13, which were both used in targeted attacks on security researchers. Those accounts have been associated with North Korea and were used to get the researchers to download malware. Tag was the group that found this from Google, and they found the campaign running all the way back in January. The campaign focused on essentially dangling the lure of 0 days and other research to sway researchers with collaboration opportunities. Now, I don't know if you've ever been involved in research or faculty or anything like that, but let me tell you, toss out some big publishing opportunity to a bunch of faculty members, and they will be on it like seagulls on a French fry in the casino parking lot in Atlantic City. That was kind of vivid. I was going to say ravens fighting over a severed hand, but I thought it would be too graphic. But then I guess I said that anyway. Oh, well. Anyway, it's nice to see Twitter canceling these accounts, but be very wary. Twitter accounts are like ravens. There's always going to be a few more on the way to seek out any severed hands that may be laying around. And, but my paranoia pays off. Maybe that'll be an entry-level cert, like paranoia and cynicism will be like a section on the entry-level cert exam. That's not a bad idea. ISC-squared. Pay attention here. The Tian Fu Cup, which is China's answer to Pwn-to-Own, provides teams the opportunity to earn rewards for vulnerabilities in widely used software. In this latest round, the teams and individuals managed to hack this following list: Windows 10, Ubuntu, iOS 15 on a iPhone 13 Pro, so the newest stuff, Exchange, Chrome, Safari, Adobe Reader, Parallels Desktop, QEMU. Oh, QEMU. Say it's not so. I love QEMU. Docker. No. VMware ESX. Oh, come on. VMware Workstation and Asus routers were all hacked. Yeah. So these people are pretty good. Basically, that resulted in a payout of approximately $1.9 million to the various teams. And the biggest single payout was $300,000 to Team Pangu for a remote jailbreak against an iPhone 13 Pro running iOS 15. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Interestingly enough, China passed a law in September that basically says that any citizen that finds a 0-day or other type of vulnerability must turn it over to the government. They can no longer do whatever they want with it. And so basically, if you don't turn it over, you've committed a crime, which is a serious thing in China. And they can only provide information about the vulnerability to the manufacturer of the product. Tian Fu is a reference to Sichuan province. That's what the two characters can be interpreted to mean. But I also think they can mean the promised land. So I found a reference in a book to Tian Fu being the promised land. So I was trying to see what maybe the name of the contest meant. And the promised land sounds like a kind of an interesting name that would be kind of Chinese in nature. I don't know why it would be related to Sichuan, but anyway. The FBI issued a warning to the U.S. public that threat actors are actively using fake and spoofed unemployment benefit websites to gather financial and personal information. And I think we did know that, but the FBI is reiterating that this is going on. The sites are typically mirrored or very closely resembling actual state and federal websites that are used for unemployment benefit. So it's kind of hard to spot unless you look at the URLs carefully. And even if you do, if you look at the list they published of URLs, they're going to be tough for a lot of people to spot. The FBI released 385 sites, which they said are fake info collection pages. Many of them are active. One of the ones I just picked out because it looked like something people would have a tough time spotting is like marylandgov.xyz. And, and there was a lot of stuff like that. So a lot of people are going to glance at it. They're going to see Maryland Gov, and they go, oh, yeah, it's a legitimate site, if they even look at all. I think this article is pretty accessible to people, so it might be an article you want to hand to your people, or obviously you can write your own release about it. But I would guess that these are also being used to do things just beyond unemployment. So Social Security, military benefits, Veterans Administration, et cetera, have all been targeted with things like this. So you definitely let your people know that they really need to be careful where anytime they're doing any kind of financial information. I was in the process of buying a house, and we were being asked to put all kinds of information in a website. I got so paranoid. I was having to like do shots of tequila just so I could calm down and do that. All right, next up, his racy novels are a staple of truck stops everywhere. Classics such as I Want the Hobo to Watch, Highway Tramps, and Sexy Hillbilly Cannibal Holocaust have been read by many a bored trucker in a rest area. He is none other than Jason Wood.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back with y'all again this week. I got a fun story for us this week on Business Security Weekly about mergers and expansion. Except, wait, this is Security Weekly News. Actually, it is kind of a business story. It's kind of what had got my attention this week, but it's about the group that operates the TrickBot malware and Conti ransomware and their operations. The article on Threat Post I have linked in the show notes basically references them as the TrickBot group or whatever. I know them as Wizard Spider, and what did they do? What was kind of interesting is what they did to get the attention, ultimately, of IBM X-Force, who wrote the report, and then Threat Post, who followed up with a blog post. Essentially, a few months back, the Wizard Spider and a couple of other groups signed, and they use the word signed, a couple of new affiliates to help spread their operations, and I assume improve their profit margins. IBM's report noted that the partnerships were formed back in June, maybe a little earlier, according to some things I read. But about that same time, they noticed an increase in the operations of the Conti ransomware, which they said that doesn't look like much of a coincidence. Looks like these groups have managed to pick up some speed on that. Conti ransomware is pretty nasty bit of ransomware. It's known for they've mentioned the Threat Post article about being deployed against hospitals even at the time of plague. So hooray for them. So what happened? Who are these players, and what are they about? Wizard Spider has been active for a really long time, for a number of years already. Their tooling is based around TrickBot, Conti, and the Bazaar Loader, which is basically a downloader to load up additional tools and get those executed on the host. The newcomers to this have been labeled Hive 016 and Hive 017. I don't know exactly what those would map to somewhere, but apparently they've been around for a while. Hive 106 is 016 is known as a spam gang. Basically, their preferred technique is to go in and, through whatever they've built, to interject themselves in and hijack existing email threads and kind of insert themselves as the original poster of it, and then get people to download a zip file that has a password on it, get people to open that up, and inside you got an HTA file or an HTML application, and that delivers TrickBot, Bazaar Loader, which is frequently followed on with Cobalt Strike, and then they move on to do whatever they can to steal information and whatnot. And now, obviously, going to leverage that to do things like deploy Conti ransomware. Hive 017 is a bit interesting to me because they were a bit of a competitor to Wizard Spider. They had their own Trojan that they named Iced ID. And here's a phrase that kind of caught my attention in the Threat Post article about this switch to using TrickBot. It, meaning the Hive 017, it switched horses to TrickBot in May and used its patented contact form distribution method, end quote. Now, a patented contact form distribution methed. What does that mean? Where do you go to patent something like that? I mean, I could just picture the patent application saying, hey, the idea behind this has got to be new and novel. So, some kind of new way nobody's ever done before to use contact forms to distribute malware that basically, gets downloaded and executes, and then we can, turn around and pivot and rob the victim blind. But don't worry, we'll follow up and with them and contact them so that we can get payment from them. Imagine some patent reviewer looking at this and going, yeah, that looks legit. What the heck? Let's give it to them. What's the name behind this? I don't know. Pwn Them All, Inc. We don't have a real address or phone number or anything like that, but the money transfer cleared, so what the heck? Rant aside, Hive 017 basically uses the contact forms on victim websites to deliver links that they use to download their payloads. And the messages that go along with this are typically used to threaten some kind of legal action, some kind of copyright infringement or something like that, to try and scare the person who's receiving this into taking the actions on it. And honestly, I've talked to folks who have been tricked by this type of routine. It plays on fears they have. Sometimes it hits on things that maybe are related to them or that they happen, I remember one person that got one saying it was a problem with their bank transfer that right after they did some transfer, and so they freaked out and responded. Either way, the victims get flustered and they fall for it. In this particular case, Hive 017 likes to use a zip file. Again, this one containing a JavaScript file that is basically the bizarre loader. They execute that, Cobalt Strike gets dropped on the host, and now they've got access to the victim's environment. Now, obviously, the idea of this partnership between already two very active groups with a third very active group is not something we want to see. Wizard Spider's been causing havoc with their attacks for a long time. I mean, TrickBot has just been constantly going through iterations, and it's like the malware that refuses to die because they keep coming back with new updates to it. It started off as a banking Trojan. Now it's much more featured. Conti Ransomware likes to do stuff like go in and destroy your backups and threaten the release of data that they stole in the process of doing the intrusion in case you feel like restoring from backup. So, it's kind of double way of extorting you. Instead of one group deploying this stuff as fast as they can, now we've got 3 of them up and running using different mechanisms to deploy the malicious software. All of these folks are very experienced at what they're doing and working on at scale. So at the end of the day, obviously this is about groups of people who have no morals about stealing and victimizing people and want to make money. For Wizard Spider, obviously this still makes perfect sense. Hey, we've got the tools, we've got the infrastructure, all this other stuff. Let's just make it as a service, and we'll bring in affiliates and let them do it, and then we'll take a cut of that, and we're earning money while we sleep. That sounds pretty good. There are still some risks for them. I mean, what would Wizard Spider do if, let's say, Hive 107 hits a victim that causes too much damage and causes some kind of political fallout? The Revo Group, for example, or Pinchy Spider as I know him as, ended up going quiet for a couple of months after the Kaseya hack because it caused such a kind of diplomatic mess for a little bit there. And they started to kind of come back here a little bit. But they went dark pretty fast after that. Wizard could find themselves in a similar spot as one of their affiliates goes off and does something that they might be like, that was a bridge too far, guys. The group itself, I mean, they could be targeted even more because they get to be more prolific. They've had instances of developers of the Conti ransomware, for example, being arrested when they go to other countries. Either way, the mergers and acquisitions team of Wizard Spider has managed to convince the management of the payoff here, and the e-crime business continues to roll on. There's money to be made, and everybody wants to grab that cash with both hands and make a stash. And this is just kind of another iteration of that.
Thank you, Jason. Always proud to hear a Pink Floyd quote work its way in there. And
I figured you were going to get that.
And I can definitely tell you that some patent clerk just rubbers. They looked at it, and went blueprint, check, item, check, name, check, fee attached, check, approved. They approved the electric chair. So it has a patent. So I'm sure. Anyway, thank you, Jason. And finally, now if you know me, you know I don't do sports. I don't know the spread on the Denver Buckaroos versus the Omaha Fangirls or anything like that. Although if there were more teams called Wizard Spider or something like that, I might be more interested. But baseball is all about statistics. I mean, you don't even have to watch the baseball games. You just do the math and you can predict the outcome. I mean, they really collect pretty much every single thing about every single action in that sport. And I had a consulting job once, so that was how I got that information. You want to know which side of his jaw the first base umpire puts his chewing tobacco on? Well, they do. Anyway, there's always been a controversy, though, about the official that decides if a pitch is in the strike zone or if it is a ball. So there's this kind of poorly defined space that's something like, below the hair of the beard and above the fifth stitch of the knee brace and the width of the shoulders of a guy named Bert in 1899, that this guy who's standing there is supposed to make a determination about, and he's supposed to see it somehow while looking over the shoulder of another guy who's squatting in the dirt and another one who's swinging a giant piece of wood at your head, all with some sort of, while you've got this mask on your face to try to keep from dying. So as you might guess, they're not very good at it. But it gives everybody a reason to fight, right? I mean, so is it valid? Is it invalid? And bad calls have changed the course of games throughout history and in tournaments and prizes and so forth. I mean, it's always been the case that people, usually the people who are angry about a bad call against them last night, argue that you should be using a robot AI to make the call. I mean, that would work, right? The robot could probably see the actual ball, which is coming in there at 90 plus miles an hour, apply the rules consistently, and make an accurate determination of the outcome. But other people, usually the people who benefited from the bad call, say, come on, it makes the game interesting and fun because it's random. But the league, Major League Baseball, has been testing just such an umpire in a minor league division or whatever they call it. The fans both love and hate the idea, and riots break out on both sides regularly. Me, personally, I kind of like the idea that everything is fair, that, it's like people aren't going, oh, come on, this guy is blind. But, I mean, who am I to question having nickel beer night on the same night as bat night in Milwaukee? Anyway, thank you, Jason. Thanks for joining us today on Security Weekly News. We can win this thing. Please get your shots, really.